Hello, my sweet friends. Welcome back to the Lantern Lit Hollow. Here, stories glow softly and help you drift off to sleep. So grab your favorite blanket, snuggle in nice and cozy, and when you're ready, we'll begin. This evening's tale is a first for this channel. We will be reading a Celtic fairy tale written by Patrick Kennedy. It's called The 12 Wild Geese, and it's about a king, a queen, a fairy, and some wild magic. There once was a king and queen that lived very happily together, and they had 12 sons and not one single daughter. We are always wishing for what we haven't and don't care for what we have, and so it was with the queen. One day in winter, when the barn was covered with snow, she was looking out of the parlor window and saw there a calf that was just killed by the butcher, and a raven standing near it. "Oh," said she, "if I only had a daughter with her skin as white as that snow, her cheeks as red as that blood, and her hair as black as that raven, I'd give away every one of my 12 sons for her." The moment she said the words, she got a great fright, and a shiver went through her. In an instant, a severe-looking old woman stood before her.
"That was a very wicked wish you made,"
she said.
"and to punish you it will be granted. You will have such a daughter as you desire, but the very day of her birth you will lose your other children."
She vanished the moment she said these words. And that was exactly the way it turned out. When she expected her delivery, she had her children all in a large room of the palace with guards all around it. But the very hour her daughter came into the world, the guards inside and outside heard a great whirling and whistling, and the 12 princes were seen flying one after another out through the open window and away like so many arrows over the woods. The poor king was in great grief for the loss of his sons, and he would be very enraged with his wife if he only knew how much to blame she was for it. Years later, everyone called the little princess Snow White and Rose Red on account of her beautiful complexion and hair. She was the most loving and lovable child that could be found anywhere. When she had grown to be 12 years old, she'd begun to feel very sad and lonely, and she began to torment her mother, asking her about her brothers that she thought were dead, for no one up to that time had ever told her the exact thing that had happened to them. The dark secret weighed very heavy on the queen's conscience, and the little princess persevered in her questions. At last she told the queen,
"Well, mother, it was on my account my poor brothers were changed into wild geese and are now suffering all sorts of hardships. Before the world is a day older, I'll be off to seek them and try to restore them to their own shapes."
The king and queen kept the princess well watched with the staff, but it was to no avail. The princess got out and went through the woods that surrounded the palace. Then she went on and on that night and kept walking through to the evening of the next day. She had brought a few cakes with her. She picked some nuts and some mugarines and found some sweet crabs as she went along. At last, she came to a nice wooden house just at sunset. There was a fine garden all around it, full of the most beautiful flowers and a gate in the hedge. She entered the house and saw a table laid out with 12 plates, 12 knives and forks, and 12 spoons. Laid upon the table were cakes, cold wild fowl, and fruit along with the plates, and there was a good fire roaring in the hearth. In another long room off of the main part of the house, she found 12 cozy beds. While she was looking about the home, she heard the gate opening and footsteps along the walk, and in came 12 young men. There was great grief and surprise written on all of their faces when they laid eyes upon her.
"Oh, what misfortune sent you here?"
said the eldest.
For the sake of a girl, we were obliged to leave our father's court and be in the shape of wild geese all day. That was 12 years ago, and we took a solemn oath that we would kill the first young girl that came into our hands. It would be a pity to put such an innocent and beautiful girl as you are out of this world, but we must keep to our oath.
But,
she said,
I'm your only sister that never knew anything about this until yesterday. And then I stole away from our father's and mother's palace last night to find you and relieve you if I can.
Every one of her brothers clasped his hands and looked down at the floor. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop, till the eldest cried out,
Accursed light upon our oath! What shall we do?
I can tell you that,
said an old woman that had just appeared among them.
Break your wicked oath, which no one should keep anyway. If you attempted to lay an uncivil finger on her, I'd change you into 12 bouillon buoys. But I wish to tell you as well as her, she is appointed to be your deliverer in this way. She must spin and knit 12 shirts for you out of bog down, to be gathered by her own hands on the moor just outside of the wood. It will take her 5 years to do it, and if she once speaks or laughs or cries the whole time, you will all have to remain wild geese by day till you're called out of the world. So take care of your sister. It is worth your while.
Then the fairy vanished, and it was only a strife with the brothers to see who would be the first to kiss and hug their sister. So for 3 long years the poor young princess was quite occupied with harvesting bog down, spinning it, and knitting it into shirts. At the end of the 3 years she had made 8. During all of that time she never spoke a word, nor laughed, nor cried. The last was the hardest to refrain from. One fine day she was sitting alone in the garden spinning, when a fine greyhound bounded up to her, laid his paws on her shoulder, and licked her forehead and hair. The next moment a handsome young prince rode up to the little garden gate, took off his hat, and asked for permission to come in. She gave him a little nod, and in he walked. He made many apologies for intruding, and asked her ever so many questions, but not one word could he get out of her. He loved her so much from the first moment he saw her that he would not leave her till he told her he was to be the king of a country just bordering on the forest, and he begged her to come home with him and be his wife. She couldn't help but love him as much as he did her, and though she shook her head very often and was very sorry to leave her brothers, at last she nodded her head in agreement and put her hand in his. She knew well enough that the good fairy and her brothers would be able to find her. Before she went, she brought out the basket holding all her bog down, and another holding the 8 shirts. The attendants took charge of these, and the prince placed her before him on his horse. The only thing that disturbed him while riding along was the displeasure his stepmother would feel at what he had done. However, he was full master at home, and as soon as he arrived he sent for the bishop, got his bride nicely dressed, and the marriage was celebrated, the bride answering by signs. The prince, now king, knew by her manners that she was of high birth, and no two could be fonder of each other. The king had been right to worry, and his wicked stepmother did all she could to make mischief, saying she was sure she was only a woodman's daughter, but nothing could disturb the young king's opinion of his wife. In good time the young queen fell pregnant and delivered a beautiful baby boy. The king was so glad he hardly knew what to do to express his joy. All of the grandeur of the christening and the happiness of the parents tormented the bad woman more than I can tell you, and she was determined to put a stop to all of their comfort. She had a sleeping posset given to the young mother, and while she was thinking and thinking of how she could best make away with the child, she saw a wicked-looking wolf down in the garden. It raised its head, looked up at her, and licked its chops. She lost no time, but snatched the child from the arms of the sleeping woman and pitched it out the window. The beast caught it in his mouth and was over the garden fence in less than a minute. Then the wicked woman pricked her own fingers with a needle and dabbled the blood around the mouth of the sleeping mother. Well, the young king was just then coming into the big barn from hunting, and as soon as he entered the home, his stepmother beckoned him forward, shed a few crocodile tears, began to cry and wring her hands, and hurried him along the passage to the bedchamber. And oh, the poor king was frightened when he saw the queen's bloody mouth and his missing child. It would take 2 hours to tell you the devilment of the old queen, the confusion and the fright and the grief of the young king and queen, the bad opinions he began to form of his wife, and the struggles she had to keep down her bitter sorrow and not give way by speaking or lamenting. The young king would not allow anyone to be called and ordered his stepmother to give out the story that the child had fallen from its mother's arms at the window and that a wild beast had run off with it. The wicked woman pretended to do so, but she told lies to everyone she spoke to about what the king and herself saw in the bedchamber. The poor young queen was the most unhappy woman in the 3 kingdoms for a very long time. Between the sorrow for her child and her husband's bad opinion of her, still she neither spoke nor cried, and she continued to gather bog down and went on with the shirts. Often the 12 wild geese would be seen lighting on the trees in the park or on the smooth sod and looking into her windows. So she worked on to get the shirts finished, but another year was at its end, and she had the 12th shirt finished except for one arm, when she was obliged to take to her bed to deliver a beautiful baby girl. Now the king was on his guard, and he would not let the mother and the child be left alone together for more than a minute. But the wicked stepmother bribed some of the attendees, set others asleep, and gave the sleepy posset to the queen again, and had a person watching for a moment to snatch the child away and kill it. But what should she see but the same wolf in the garden, looking up and licking his chops again. Out went the child, away with it flew the wolf, and she smeared the sleeping mother's mouth and face with blood, and then roared and bawled and called out to the king and everyone she met. The room was filled with people, and everyone was sure the young queen had just devoured her own babe. The poor young mother thought now her life would leave her. She was in such a state she could neither think nor pray, but she sat like a stone and worked away at the arm of the 12th shirt. The king wanted to take her back to the house in the woods where he had found her, but his stepmother, the lords of the court, and the judges would not hear of it. The young queen was condemned to be burned in the big barn at 3 o'clock that same day. As the burning hour drew near, the king went to the farthest part of his palace, and there was no unhappier man than him in his kingdom at that hour. When the executioners came and led her off, she took the pile of shirts in her arms. There were still a few stitches needed, and while they were tying her to the stakes, she still worked on them. As she finished the last stitch, she seemed overcome and dropped a tear on her work. But the moment after, she sprung up and shouted, "I am innocent! Call my husband!" The executioners stayed their hands except one wicked disposed creature who set fire to the log next to him. And while all were struck in amazement, there was a rushing of wings, and in a moment the 12 wild geese were standing around the pyre. before you could count to 12, she had flung a shirt over each bird, and there, in the twinkling of an eye, were 12 of the finest young men that could be collected out of 1,000. While some of the brothers untied their sister, the eldest took a strong stake in his hand and struck the busy executioner with such a blow that he never needed another. While they were comforting the young queen and the king was hurrying to the spot, a fine-looking woman appeared among them holding the babe in one arm and the little prince by his hand. There was nothing to do but cry for joy and laugh for joy and hug and kiss. And when they finally had time to thank the good fairy, who, in the shape of a wolf, carried the children away, she was not to be found. Never was such happiness enjoyed in any palace that was ever built, and the king, queen, and their children lived happily together forevermore, and the wicked queen and her helpers were imprisoned for the rest of their lives for their wicked deeds. And that brings our tale to an end, my sweet friends. Now it is time to turn the lantern down to a soft glow. Snuggle with your favorite stuffy and let yourself drift off to dreamland. Sleep sweet, my dear friends, and I'll be here when next you return to the Lantern Lit Hollow. Good night.